All right, if everybody's ready, thank you all for taking your afternoon time at work to be here. The purpose and goal of this, that, in conversation, not just with council, but with others, they're talking about a development impact fee. And so in those conversations, I want to know as to what it comprises of, what are some of the things you're going to be able to use it for, the fee. So in that conversation with those people, my staff and I, had a little work to do. So late in 2023, the city, after we had this conversation in 2023, council approved the contract with Tassel Vice to actually go up and do a developmental setup stage for this. And by doing this, we have been working with this group for about, I want to say maybe 2 years to be exact. And then we brought it to, from council, for consideration. So my staff and I have been working diligently along with Georgetown Municipal Water and Sewer to get information, and this report is what you're going to hear today. This report, in essence, was kind of brought to council early in April, and by Mr. Ben Griffin. So he's here today. He's going to talk a bit more about that. But today's intent was as follows. We're at the point now that, we've got information. We need to share that information with stakeholders here. We need to hear your feedback on this, because from this feedback gives us a direction where we need to go as a city. Is it something that we need to do, or something we need to take a step back from? Nothing is set in stone. And ultimately, it's going to come to where council wants to push this forward or not. So this is a good opportunity for you to come and say what you wanted to say and give us some information that we definitely want to have, so in making that decision. But this is a big decision. And like I said, it's not set in stone. So we're at that point to where we want to get your input, and that's important. I don't think you ever should try to do something without going to the people that it possibly will affect. That's just not good business. And that's not the way that I'm going to operate. That's the way you would want us to operate. You want to at least have some say-so in this, or at least say, hey, Mary, have y'all thought about this? This is probably not the best idea for us. Or look at some of the issues with it. But today is also to dispel some of the, misclaimers, what you can use it for, the projections and some of that. Also, you're going to find out, hopefully, a actual fee summary of what it will look like. So that's the purpose of this today. And we're on the clock, so we have to be out here by 10 minutes till 5, because they got the Board of Adjustments meeting today, so that will be there. And before I turn it over to Mr. Ben Griffin, if you would introduce yourself. We got a microphone somewhere, Devin, on that end, and I'll give this over here. If you would introduce yourself to let everybody know as to who you are and what you represent, and that way we'll know what the interest group that we have here, okay?
Hi, Buddy Goodwin, General Counsel, Ball Homes, residential development primarily.
Kim Marshall, Market President for Central Bank.
Tammy Lesby Mitchell, Georgetown City Councilwoman.
Jacob Cassidy, I work with CJ at May Commercial Group, commercial real estate development firm.
CJ May, I work with Jake at same place. May Group.
David Miller, Chinkapin Brewing.
Autumn Dimitrovich, Columbia Gas.
Jack Connor with Georgetown Scott County Chamber, Scott County United, Scott County Industrial Forum.
Holden Fleming, Georgetown Scott County Planning Commission.
Michael Crisp, Georgetown City Council.
Greg Hampton, Georgetown City Council.
I'm Todd Osterloh, I'm an attorney with Sturgill Turner, working with GMWSS.
Chase Azevedo, Georgetown Municipal Water and Sewer Service.
Jeff Nutter, Georgetown Municipal Water and Sewer.
Thank you again for showing up and doing this, all on this side over here.
I'm Joe Pat Covington. I'm County Judge Executive, and I work for the people of Scott County.
Mike Hockensmith, Scott County United and the Hockensmith Agency.
Mike Scoggin, Georgetown News Graphic.
Josh Nash with Georgetown Police Department.
Tim Thompson, Georgetown Fire Department.
Dick Murphy, I'm a lawyer. I represent Anderson Communities and Urban Group.
Brian Stevens, Ball Homes. Dwayne Ellison, Scott County Schools and Fiscal Court.
Matt Welch, local developer and builder.
Elmer Whitaker, Chairman and CEO of Whitaker Bank.
Mark Walls, Whitaker Bank.
Joe Arnold, Market President, Whitaker Bank.
Chris Busey, Precise Title in Georgetown.
Todd Johnson, Building Industry Association of Central Kentucky.
Kim Minke, Georgetown City Council and consultant.
And Jared Grant with Stockyards Bank.
All right, now we got everybody, and you want to introduce yourself? That's, if you don't know who that is Chief Administrative Officer Devin Golden. She's my right-hand person here that she keeps me from two things. Number one, paying more taxes. Number two, going to jail. So that she does that well. So anyway, once again, thank you all for being here for this evening for that. And again, before I turn over to Mr. Griffin, is anybody, council members, if anybody you all want to say anything or comment or anything before you all want to, crickets? Okay, all right. All right, so Mr. Griffin.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, because I was just on a call with someone in Arizona where it is barely after all right, so today we want to talk about impact fees, give you an update on what we're doing in the process. This presentation dated June 3rd is the latest and greatest, so it varies slightly from the last report that we showed with the council. We got some comments from council, got some comments from staff, made a few adjustments, and I'll point those out as we go through them. But we figured it best to start with a development impact fee basics, so bring everyone up to speed on impact fees. Look at the timeline, the land use assumptions, which is essentially the development projections, and then we'll look at each individual fee category. So what are impact fees? Well, they're a one-time payment for growth-related infrastructure. Generally, they're collected at the time of a building permit. So this is something paid by new development. It is not something paid by existing development. You can't use impact fees for operations, maintenance, repair, replacement, rehab. This needs to be some sort of capacity, or it needs to expand a fleet of assets. So again, no operations, no maintenance, no replacement. This is not a tax, but it does bind the city and it binds the water utility to providing these growth-related improvements once that impact fee is paid. So you'll hear a lot of discussion about level of service with impact fees. And the most important thing with level of service is that you can't charge an impact fee to future development based on a higher level of service than existing development receives. There's one caveat to that, and if you identify an outside funding source, you can charge that higher level of service because you have some sort of mechanism to essentially raise that level of service. So an easy example would be parks, even though we're not including parks in this. If you had a park master plan that said, our desired level of service is 6 acres per thousand, but we currently only provide 3 acres per thousand. If the city found grant money or some sort of outside mechanism to raise that level of service to 6 acres per thousand, then we could base the fee on that. But without the outside funding mechanism, we have to make sure that whatever your existing level of service is, that's what we're charging the based on. There are three requirements of the impact fee study. First is need. So we need to make sure there's growth. And so we've talked with staff, we've looked at the comp plan update, and, we're pretty confident with the, continued growth. The other part of proving need is that there are actual improvements needed to serve future development. And so we want to focus on system level improvements. So things that provide a regional benefit, not a project level improvement like a turn lane into or out of a development. It needs to be something that is going to provide a benefit to, not just a specific development. We also need to prove benefit. So there are two ways of doing that. The first is making sure that once the city or the utility receive that impact fee money, they actually spend it. So you're not going to sit on this for 20 or 30 years. There is a timely manner. The other part of benefit is a geographic benefit. So we want to make sure that the fee payer, that development is close enough geographically to receive a benefit from the development. It's easy on the utilities because they're connected to a closed system. With the police, fire, and municipal facilities components. If you were a city that was 600, 700, 800 square miles, we might need to break the city up into smaller service areas. But because you're relatively compact, we have a single service area for those fees. Finally, we want to make sure that fees are proportionate to demand. So you'll see on the residential fees, we vary those fees by the size of unit, because smaller units have fewer people, larger units have more people. Those larger units should pay proportionately more than a smaller unit based on the additional demand for infrastructure. On the non-residential side, you'll see we vary the fees by vehicle trips generated or the number of employees at the site. And that's just a way to make sure that different non-residential businesses pay their proportionate share of demand. There are generally three fee methodologies. They look at points in time. So when we're looking to the past, we're looking at a cost recovery approach, where essentially there's excess capacity and you or the future development is buying into this excess capacity. When we look to the present, that's the incremental expansion methodology. So it just looks at your existing level of service, and it looks at what it would cost to construct a square foot of facilities or to acquire a unit of some sort of equipment, and your fee is based on that formula. There's also the plan-based approach where we look to the future and maybe it's defined where we have this master plan or we have the CIP that says we're going to have these improvements. So how do we get there? What's the cost associated with that? And then do we need to break this out between existing development and future development to assess that level of service? Also, we have to look at credits. So there are three types of credits, but the first one, the site-specific credit, that's handled after the adoption of the impact fees. So if there is, if a developer, constructs or conveys something, to the city that's included in the impact fee study, they should get a credit against their impact fees for that. Debt service and dedicated revenues, those are actually handled in the impact fee study. So to make sure that we're not charging development once through the impact fee and once through that future debt service payment or that future dedicated revenue, we reduce the impact fee to offset those additional revenues. All right, so we started this in January of 2024. We over the next few months, worked in the land use assumptions. We started showing, development impact fees. We had our first public hearing in September of last year. We took the comments from council, we took the comments from staff, made some adjustments, and we had another presentation in April. Same thing. We took comments, made some, additional adjustments. And so now what we're showing to you is the latest and greatest. But, on the horizon, we're looking at, a first and second reading of an ordinance and, the potential adoption of, the development fees. All right, so now we're looking at the development projections. This is important because we need to know in the base year how much development, the city of Georgetown has. That way we could say, well, this is, our current level of service for fire. This is our current service for police. And so that base year employment, or that base year population is, very important for the impact fee calculation. Then going forward, the next 10 years, we played around with a few options, but on the residential side, we aligned with the comp plan update, and the assumption is an annual 2% growth rate, and then we can convert that additional population to housing units using census. On residential side, we looked at permit history and use the average annual increase by the different land uses. So industrial, commercial, office, institutional. We use that average annual increase from 2020 through 2023 with the assumption that you would grow in a similar fashion as you had in recent history. And so the far right is that column is what you should really focus on. We're saying we think over the next 10 years, if you grow by about 8,500 people, then that represents about 37 housing units, 3,700 housing units. And the split is slightly higher to single family compared to multifamily. On the non-residential side, about 2.5 million square feet of new non-residential floor area, and that would translate into about 4,700 additional jobs in that new floor area. All right, so we have to have these proportionate to demand. So on the residential side, instead of using just a standard single family versus multifamily occupancy rate, we talked with staff, and we wanted to make sure that housing affordability was at the forefront of this. And one way of doing that is to shift away from fees by type of unit and move to fees by size of unit. Because if you're looking at fees by type of unit, a smaller single family unit will subsidize that larger single family unit. Same thing with smaller units are subsidizing the larger ones, because if you just take the average of all single family units or the average of all multifamily units, then those smaller units are subsidizing the larger ones. And so instead of assessing fees by type of unit, we can use census data to come up with the occupancy by size ranges. And so you can see that this 1,000 square foot or less range, we're saying there's just over 1% per unit in those really small 1,000 square foot or less housing units. But then when we compare that to the largest units of over 3,000 square feet, there's 3.23 persons. So we can show that there's more people in these larger units, so they should pay proportionately more in impact fees for the additional demand they place. And this keeps the smaller units more affordable because they're paying less in impact fees. On the non-resident side, we use vehicle trip generation rates and employment density factors published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So we can vary those fees proportionately to demand. So for fire and police fees, we use vehicle trips. So that's commercial and institutional uses generate the most vehicle trips. They're going to pay higher fees than industrial and office development. For facilities fees, we use employees. So because office and institutional uses have more employees, they will pay higher fees than industrial and commercial development. Again, just making sure that the fees are proportional to the actual demand for different types of infrastructure. All right, so start with the fire fees. We're looking at a single citywide service area with 3 fee components. So a facility component, an apparatus component, and then an equipment component, all using an incremental methodology. So just maintaining the existing level of service. And so if we apply the existing level of service to those 10-year growth projections, Georgetown would need, just shy of 4,300 square feet of fire facilities at a cost of about $1 million. For apparatus, this would generate demand for about 70% of a unit. And then for communication equipment, 52 units or about $190,000. So on the left side shows the fee components at the very top and the cost per person, the cost per vehicle trip. That middle section on the left, that's the actual residential fees. So you can see, let me see if I can select this, 1,000 square feet or less, 1.05 person per housing unit. You're going to pay $501 for the growth related capital costs for fire. Those larger units are more than 3,000 square feet because they have people per unit. They're going to pay proportionately more, so about $1,500 compared to the smallest units with 500. At the bottom, these are the non-residential uses. So with this, it gives you, so for example, industrial generates 2.44 vehicle trips for every 1,000 square feet of floor area. So they're going to pay 19 cents per square foot for growth related capital costs related to fire. On the right side, this just shows the projected fee revenue. So if we maintain existing level of service, there's about $5.1 million in growth related costs for fire. And you can see that we project to generate just over $5 million in fire impacting revenues. Next up, we have facilities. So again, a citywide service area. We have one component. It is a plan-based component for the City Hall expansion. The total cost of a City Hall expansion is about $12.5 million. There is a $1.8 million tax credit, so we deduct that from the total cost. So the actual fee calculation is based on 10.7 million. So the total cost less any tax credits. And so that $10.7 million, 2.1 million of it is future developments share of the total costs, and existing developments share of that's $8.6 million. So just like with fire, left side shows the cost per person or job, and then fees, and the right side shows the projected costs and projected revenue. So as I said, that $10.7 million net cost of City Hall expansion, about 2.1 million of that is growth related, and about 6 million of that is existing developments share. Right, for police, again, a citywide service area, we're looking at 2 components, a facilities component and an equipment component, both using the incremental methodology. The April version of the report did include a vehicle component. We have removed that because it looks like the city will continue to lease those vehicles and not move towards complete ownership. So we removed that component, which brought the fees down slightly. So for police facilities, if you retain the existing level of service, you need about 6,400 square feet of police facilities over the next 10 years at a cost of about $2 million. 27 additional units of equipment at a cost of about $187,000. Left side, you see the police fees for residential ranging from $337 on the small end to just over $1,000 on the high end. And total cost of the growth related cost of police improvements is about $3.4 million, and projected fee revenue is just under $3.4 million. Right, so for water, the service area is the municipal water and sewer service area. We have three components. There is a water system improvements component that's plan-based. So it's some improvements that will provide a benefit to future development, but likely provide a benefit to existing development. And so looking out over the next 10 years, we can allocate the cost of those water system improvements to total development at the end of this 10-year projection period. So that $12.7 million cost of water system improvements. Growth would fund about $2.3 million of that. And other funding of about $5 million that's exclude from the calculation. And so, we're looking at, growth covering a portion of it, but not all. Yes. For equipment and facilities, those are using incremental methodologies, maintaining the existing level of service. So over 10 years, you would need 8 additional units of equipment and about 3,000 square feet of facilities related to water service. So with water, we have to vary the fees by demand. And so we know that certain uses demand more or less water than others. And to come up with our projection of water demand over the next 10 years, we actually compare it to the sewer flow from the regional facilities plan. And using those metrics, we project an increase of about 1.4 million gallons of average day demand over the next 10 years. So we're really trying to solve for about 1.4 million gallons of capacity improvements. And so this just shows that those water system improvements where if it costs $12.7 million, you've got $5 million of other funding. So really, it's $7.7 million to provide this improvement. And because it provides a benefit to existing development, we're just going to allocate that $7.7 million worth of improvements to, average day demand in 2034. So that includes the 1.4 million gallons of, growth related demands, but it also includes the demand from existing development. So we can charge everyone, for the same level of service and not overcharge to developments. So really what we're doing here is just saying, hey, if the eligible cost is $7.7 million, we divide it by total demand in 2034. So we should be charging future development $1.61 per gallon for their share of water system improvements. At the bottom, you see that if average day demand does increase by about 1.4 million gallons, this would generate about $2.3 million impact fee revenue related to water system. So with the utility fee schedules, there are a couple extra steps because we use the demand factors from the water and sewer availability application. So these don't match up exactly with how we assess the non-utility fees. So on the residential side, we're doing size of unit, whereas for utilities, for apartments, we vary it by the number of bedrooms. So 1, 2, 3 bedroom. Then there's a single family unit, there's a duplex, there's a condo. But each of those, it has its own demand factor, ranging from 250 gallons per day on the low end up to 400 gallons a day on the high end. But essentially, it's the same calculation on the residential side. We're just taking that cost per gallon, we multiply it by average day demand in gallons to come up with those residential fees. So for example, for a single family unit, if it's $2.57 a gallon and they use 400 gallons per day, then the proposed fee is $1,000 or $1,028 for a single family unit. On the non-residential uses, there are some extra steps because the water and sewer availability application, it may define demand, per room. For motels, it may be per person, for factories, per acre, for some uses. So to give you a sort of a clear comparison, we're showing industrial for a 50,000 square foot facility and a shopping center with 50,000 square feet. But essentially, it's 257 a gallon times, the number of gallons per acre or the gallons per square foot. And then we convert that, for a, 50,000 square foot industrial use, that's about 4.5 acres. On the shopping center, it's 50,000 square feet. So you can see that, an industrial user, on average is going to use more water than a shopping center. So they should pay proportionately more than a shopping center. But again, this is all these demand factors that you see, these are pulled from, the municipal water and sewer service, water sewer availability application. All right, and wastewater, the utilities service area will be the service area for the wastewater fees. We're looking at two components, a wastewater treatment component and then an equipment component. For wastewater treatment, if developed within the wastewater treatment plant 1 collection area, there will be a cost recovery approach to fund the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. Any development within treatment plant 2 or 3, those collection areas will not be assessed a fee. There is available capacity to serve future development. So at this time, we do not include a fee related to wastewater treatment for treatment plant 2 or 3. The equipment component is incremental, so we're just maintaining the existing level of service. So, to do that, we need about 13 units of additional equipment at a cost of $1 million. I'll give you a little more detail on the wastewater in a couple slides because it's generally easier to understand, once I can show you all the numbers. This shows projected flow from the regional facilities plan by each treatment plant collection area. So over the next 10 years, average day flow in treatment plant 1 is projected to increase by about 1.6 million gallons. Treatment plant 2 is just shy of 300,000 gallons, and then treatment plant 3 about 12,000 gallons. So overall, we're looking at an increase of about 1.8 billion gallons of additional wastewater flow from future development over the next 10 years. The left side shows current capacity utilization at the top, and then at the bottom, what happens, 10 years out. So, if Georgetown does nothing, there's essentially no treatment capacity available in, treatment plant 1. So this is why, we're looking at including a fee to, offset some of the costs associated with the treatment plant 1 expansion. So on the right side, you can see that the total cost of the treatment plant 1 expansion is $63.5 million. There's other funding of $9 million that we net out of the calculation. So really, we're trying to solve for $54.5 million. And then we drill down a little further and we say, well, really, 27 million of this, it's costs related to providing wastewater treatment to existing development. So, upgrades and replacements that truly only benefit existing development. So the remaining $27.5 million, that's the eligible cost. So, future development, their 4.5 million gallons of treatment capacity costs $27.5 million, or $6.11 per gallon. And so at the bottom, you can see that, if treatment plant 1, that collection area grows by 1.6 million gallons of wastewater flow over the next 10 years, that would generate about $9.5 million towards the $27.5 million related to future development. So just like with water, we take the cost per gallon of capacity and we multiply by the demand factors provided by the utility. And so for a single family unit, in the wastewater treatment plant 1 collection area, so the area that does actually pay the treatment component, it's $6.72 a gallon. They use 400 gallons a day, so it's about $2,700 per single family unit. We use the same calculation on industrial and shopping. It's $6.72 a gallon times the average day factors from the availability location. So if development is not located within the treatment plant 1 collection area, so if they're in 2 or 3, they don't pay the wastewater treatment component. So really they're only paying for wastewater equipment and then the actual fee study cost. And so a single family unit in treatment plant 2 or 3 collection area would only pay $244 for the wastewater component impact fee. Right, so this shows the proposed fees. So on the left side, these are the non-utility fees. So for residential, it's by size of the unit. So ranging from just under $1,000 on the small end to just over $3,000 on the large end. And then on the right side, these are the proposed fees for water and wastewater. You can see, we have water with just 1 service area, but wastewater would have 2 service areas, essentially in wastewater plant 1 collection area or outside of it. And then it just shows the complete or maximum fee by a couple of the land uses. So you can see that a 1-bedroom apartment, they pay just under $1,000 in non-utility fees. They pay $643 fees, $1,680 in wastewater fees, for a total of about $3,300 for a 1-bedroom apartment. On the higher end, a 2,200 square foot single family unit would pay about $6,200. Bottom, this shows the non-residential uses. So these all represent a 50,000 square foot industrial, commercial, or office use, or a 75 unit lodging development. And so you can see, full freight on these, it's ranging on the low end from about $73,000 for this, 50,000 square foot light industrial development to $325,000 for a 75 unit hotel. So that is the final slide. I'll turn it back over to the mayor if he wants to open up comments now. We can provide more detail on some of these projects if needed, but we sort of give you a higher level understanding before we turn it back over to any sort of questions.
So I hope everybody could hear Ben okay. I know it got a little bit cutting in and out. I confirmed that the live stream caught it completely, so good news there is if there was anything that anybody needs clarified, we can watch that after the fact. But the next item on the agenda is that stakeholder questions, comments, and general discussion. The intent here is open forum. We've got a microphone on both sides of the room, so simply raise your hand, and if it's a question, the consultant or we've got staff members represented from all of the different fee categories. So if it's a city level question, we can help facilitate that, but the consultant is available to answer those questions. Or if it's just a comment on how you feel about the assumptions used or any component of this, this is, like I said, live streamed and recorded, and that comment will be, on the record for the folks who ultimately make the decision here to consider. So if you've got a question or a comment, just raise your hand and we'll hand you the mic. Well, and I know it's a lot of information as well, so I'm sure there's some component of needing to digest. I think the mayor.
A lot of information really quickly.
Right. Yeah.
Will we be able to get this report without just seeing it on the screen? Kind of. Okay.
Yeah, and that's
That'd
what I was
helpful.
going to say next was that this is the first stakeholder session.
Okay.
Ben referenced public hearings. They were really just public presentations in the course of council meetings. I know public hearings kind of a term of art. But this is the first stakeholder session. There will be additional opportunities for questions and feedback. And I'll make sure I think we have one or two stragglers, but I think I've got about everybody's email. We can also make this presentation available on the city's website so that folks who weren't here today have the opportunity to review and watch the presentation. But the goal would then be that we would hear feedback from you all and take that feedback to kind of guide the next stakeholder session and continue the conversation. I use the analogy, we're starting with this really large funnel, and the goal would be that as the council and staff and stakeholders weigh in, that funnel is narrowed, and ultimately the product that comes before the city council for ultimate decision, takes all of those things into consideration in some meaningful way.
I'm not clear on who is impacted by these impact fees. Is it intended to be all users of services within the municipality, or is it just new development, new users coming in that are assessed these fees?
Ben, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, so this will be paid by all new development. So existing development, they're not going to pay this unless someone decides to sell their house and build something new, or if an existing commercial development expands. So maybe they go from 50,000 square feet to 75,000. They would pay fees on that increase. But existing development does not pay this. This is a way to prevent existing development from having to shoulder the costs or the capital costs related to growth.
And just adding to that, one of the slides noted that this fee is typically collected at the building permit issuance phase. That doesn't mean that if it were to be adopted by the council, that's when it would happen here. But in most communities that do this, it coincides with that building permit. So essentially anything that's going to need to pull that permit is going to be considered in that calculation. Well, if there is no one else, Mayor, I'll let you, Yeah.
Devin, I'm David Lusby. I've kind of had a unique situation where I've been in banking for over 30 years, and I've served on the Georgetown City Council for 29 years, and I've done kind of my own thing in the community as well over that period of time. So I've seen, the impact on the city's budget and some of the challenges that the city's had over that period of time. But I also see from a banking perspective, when somebody's trying to do a project or a development, how certain costs impact the viability of that project. And that has become more and more difficult, in recent, since COVID, quite honestly. Interest rates going up, just the cost of materials and so forth. And I'm trying to be very open-minded, and I'm not really trying to say what needs to be done necessarily, because I love this community, and I'm sure we all do, or we wouldn't be here. And I worry about for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Sometimes you don't know what might potentially happen, and it makes me think about the county, for example. Planning and zoning has been having workshops allowing people to come in and talk about 5-acre tracts, cluster developments, and what the county's going to look like in the future. And I guess that would be one thing I would like for you all to think about, for everybody to think about, that if this did take effect in some form or fashion, how much additional pressure does that put on the county if they don't have impact fees? And in my mind, I think that could be rather significant. So I kind of want to share at least that one perspective. As this gentleman said, this is a lot of information to take in a very short period of time. The quality of the message was difficult for me to, at least to hear and understand. So I kind of want to see it and review it. But I do appreciate you all having this opportunity and allowing the stakeholders to come in and have their opportunity to speak. So thank you.
I've got two questions, I guess, for the consultant. One is, have you studied whether there'll be a requirement for any state law changes in order to accomplish this? And the second is, in your studies, have you factored in the fact that higher prices for consumers may lower demand? We're getting hit with, as Mr. Lusby said, interest rates, tariffs causing much higher building costs, and adding on costs like this keep pushing it up. Have you all studied whether there's going to be an impact on demand for housing as a result of increased fees such as this?
I'll defer the first question to staff. I mean, there are communities in Kentucky that are assessing, utility fees. But I'll let Devin speak to, if they think they'll need any sort of, state law change. Whether or not impact fees, reduce demand, this is a question that comes up a lot, and communities that don't have impact fees, considering them, or in communities where their fees are increasing. And there were some studies during the recession in Florida that compared communities that basically got rid of their impact fees because they thought it would spur development. They compared it to communities that didn't, and they actually kept their impact fees. And the communities that kept their impact fees, saw more growth than the ones that got rid of their impact fees. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the impact fee was the cause of that, but there are some benefits to an impact fee because that the community is going to provide continued capital improvements. So you don't have roads as a component, but that's generally an area where when development is coming, people will say, hey, look, our traffic's already terrible enough. Why would we allow more additional growth? And so if the city is continuing to expand capacity where needed to mitigate the impacts of that growth, then it sends a signal of, hey, okay, we're still investing in the community, and so that is a signal to the development community that if you continue to develop in this community, the reasons that bring development here aren't going to go away. So it is a positive thing, but it's really hard to prove that impact fees will drive away development because you can't change location. There's a reason that development wants to happen in a particular place, and if development continues without adding additional capital infrastructure, then the quality of that place erodes to time. So this is a way to prevent that from happening without having to put those growth costs on existing development. So making the existing residents or the existing businesses, pay higher taxes to, add additional, police or fire space, or, increasing the water and sewer rates, to add additional capacity to serve development. Why would you want to put those growth related costs on, existing development? The grandparents who have, lived in the community for, 50 years, they, paid off their house, but their, property taxes or their, their water and sewer bill is going up every month, to cover, these growth related costs that, they didn't cause. So I hope that sort of answered your question.
Brian Stevens with Ball Homes.
We can barely, if you can hear me, we can hear about half your words. I think we get a lot of the gist, but we're having a hard time hearing everything you're saying.
My question is, I think I understood that the money should benefit the new development areas or not. I want some clarification. And if so, if it's meant to be, if they're the ones paying the new facilities, the new fire engines, what have you, will be in their areas, what guarantees does a developer have that this money will be spent to benefit the folks that he's selling his homes or renting apartments to? Or is this just can be spread anywhere in the community, even where there may not be a new development?
Great question. So, with fire, usually if, one station is responding, then, the next station, is ready for that next response. So if, maybe there's an open bay at one station, and maybe that's the closest one to the development in question, they're still going to receive benefit because that additional apparatus or that additional square footage of facilities will provide a benefit to that development in the form of increased, or I guess decreased wait times or increased response. So there is a benefit to that development, even if that new apparatus isn't next door to the development, because it does provide an additional unit to the fleet, and so you can respond to that development more quickly than you could if you didn't have that additional unit.
Okay. Well, my name's John Woodall. I just have one comment. I've been through this in Lexington, been through this in Nicholasville when it was adopted there, and I think this is more of an answer to your question, sir. We are in it's documented, a massive housing crisis in this state. Massive. All communities. We're, by anybody's estimation, I think in Lexington, 22,000 units short. And what happens with these charges? I mean, a developer, as David Lusby will tell you, within the boundaries of the development, they pay for all the infrastructure at the end of the day. What happens with these charges is they get passed on, and they price people out, is what they do.
Sir, can you hold your mic up a little higher?
Well, it doesn't really work. But, okay, so at the end of the day, we need to be really, really careful about this program, especially in the current economic environment that we find ourselves in, with interest rates, tariffs, price of land, and the need for housing for so many people that don't have it.
Yes, I'm CJ. I started in this business in 1985, and at that point in time, I was working in retail, strictly retail. We were renting space for, we would have to fight and scratch to rent space for $8 a square foot. That same space today is going to rent from $30 to $50 a square foot. Now, the way retailers are going to look at this, they're going to come into this market and they're going to determine what kind of sales estimate they can get, what the competition, what their market share is going to be. And they're going to say, okay, we can pay a percentage of that sales estimate in rent. And we take that rent and let's say it's X number of dollars, how much debt will that service? So with that, we solve for the debt. And, you know, we did some quick math here. We're working on a project here in Georgetown, an industrial project, and I believe if Jake's numbers are correct, our fees on this would be $3.2 million, okay? That's not going to work. It's going to stop this whole project. Now, I'm sympathetic to your needs, and I feel like you're sympathetic to us, but we're all kind of in this thing together. We're partners. Everybody's got to eat. But when it comes down to it, when we have to pay fees, just like John said, we got to pass it along. And there comes a point at which these tenants cannot pay this. And I don't see how they pay it today. But there's got to be a solution here somewhere, because we do like clean water, we like good police and fire protection and all that stuff, because it keeps your property values up. So, as they'd say, there's a pony in here somewhere. There's a deal here to be made that's fair and reasonable for everybody. But if Jake's math is right, you just killed a $250 million deal here in Georgetown. Because not only that, we got to deal with the federal government. And we got fees equal to that with them. And it now has exceeded the cost of our land, which was $6 million. So I just want everybody to know that we're kind of in this thing together, and we all understand the pains and stuff that we go through. But if we can't make these deals pencil, all of us are going to be looking for work somewhere. I guess that's all I got. That's probably too much.
Quick question. Jacob Cassidy, and to CJ's point, just some quick math. You know, my question, one of my questions is the carrying costs on this fee, particularly on bigger projects. Can you talk a bit about the rationale for this fee being due when the permit is issued versus maybe CO of the actual building? For, you know, if you have a larger, longer build out, the carrying costs on that fee alone could be pretty significant.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's generally at the time of permit. But there's nothing to prevent Georgetown from saying, hey, yeah, we're okay with certificate of occupancy, because really the idea of the impact, you want to assess it before anyone moves into this building, because you want to be able to stop development before they can impact your services. And so this is sort of the last time you can assess a fee before they've started to put that impact on development. So some communities do say, hey, yeah, we're okay, maybe not on in a unit, but on apartments or non-residential uses, of waiting until certificate of occupancy, just to reduce those carry costs to the development community.
This is CJ again. We purchased this property 2.5 years ago, and we've spent 2.5 years working with FEMA, the Corps of Engineers, to get our permits. We go through the Indiana BATs and archaeological and everything that all developers have to go through, because we want to do this thing right, okay? We don't want to get shut down in the middle of our project. But we have a model that we work on when we buy these properties, and that model does not include these fees. So if we've already committed to this project by purchasing this property, then suddenly our whole plan is disrupted. So there should be some consideration done, given to people who are in a position that somebody has moved the cheese on you in the middle of the game, Okay, that's all I got. Thanks, Chase.
Thank you, CJ.
Chase, can I ask one clarification? Sorry, this is Buddy Goodwin again. This is for the consultant. I just want to make sure I understand a little bit, or clearly understand your assumption of where these impact fees will go. I don't know if it's exactly Brian's question, but so I would say right now, in a lot of the development we've done all over the place for a long time, developers pay impact fees. We build facilities, we improve roads. So in these costs and these impact fees, so that means that's the government saying, we'll take care of all that now. Is that correct?
They're saying they'll take care of the capital costs related to police, fire, municipal facilities, water and sewer.
Water and sewer and road? No road?
There's nothing for streets.
For streets, okay. But water and sewer and all those capital costs would then be taken care of by the government? Okay.
The costs outside of.
Well, that's all the impact, right? I mean, that's the whole, that's all the main facilities, right? Pump stations and all those kind of things? No. Okay. Okay, well, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do.
And to be responsive to the feedback about the consultant not being here in person, City Council approved a contract. There were so many in-person visits, and those have lapsed. So we can amend that contract to provide another in-person visit responsive to that feedback. But that's to no fault of Ben's. That's just what our contract provided. But hearing that feedback and knowing some other opportunities and some questions that we had today that we can probably narrow in on and make sure that are better answered, we will review those questions and make a little transcript of that.
This is Matt Welch. So on the impact fees, how would the impact fees impact the privilege fee that we already have to pay?
It's two separate fees.
The privilege fee would still be in play.
The only thing from a privilege fee standpoint is what is factored into the fee of the component, and those are two different things.
So, to CJ's point, if the impact fees negate the feasibility of his development, how much would the city be losing in payroll tax? Would the loss of the payroll tax offset the impact fee?
Property tax. Remember, the impact fees are one-time.
Yeah, it's one time.
Impact fees just one-time payment. It's done.
It's done,
Taxes
but
pay year after year after year.
yeah, but that one-time fee just eliminated a $250 million project.
Which was probably zoned AR before you bought it, and goes to industrial, and then it's reassessed at a higher rate to allow for higher property taxes.
It was already zoned. All the utilities were there, so we thought, our fees were going to be minimal.
No, I understand your expectation.
But the point is, when you improve it will ultimately be reassessed, and the property taxes will go up. That's part of your.
Can y'all make sure to pass the mic so that we're catching who's speaking?
Yeah, pass the mic if you're talking, that way we can pick it up on the.
No, we've got all that broken down, John. Yeah, we can tell you exactly how many tax dollars are going to be generated from, and whether they'll come from payroll taxes, net profit taxes, ad valorem taxes, or whatever. How much of that goes to the schools? We've got that, and it's substantial. Jake can tell you. I forget numbers, but.
Tammy Mitchell, City Councilwoman. I just had a question with regard to your question earlier. Where we have impact fees in other cities, at what point in the process of development are those fees initiated? Like, for instance, if we decided to do this and someone was in the middle of a process of development, would they be impacted, or would we go back? Would it only be people who come in new with new developments? So if you're in the middle of something.
Well, if we're in the middle, let me see. If we're in the middle of a project, we've already modeled that, and we've done our development plans, we've done our budgets from the construction standpoint, we've done our income side of the, and at the end of the day, we're looking at what's cost and income. Keep it simple. This is the cost and this is the income, and it will service that debt on there, or give us a return on our investment. We simply look for a spread, no different than a bank or a retailer or anyone, profit margin thing. And to John's point, labor prices, material prices, everything's going up, and there comes a point at which the tenants just can't pay it. So based on our model, to answer your question, this is what our cost is. As that cost moves, we probably have locked in rent with tenants, so that's just going to squeeze us a little more. And in my world, especially at my age, I worry about risk. I worked all my life to get to where I am today, and we analyze our risk, and if you know and understand risk, then good for you. If you don't, you shouldn't be in the business. So we know what we're getting into before we do it. But if the rules change in the middle of it, that kind of changes the whole thing. Did I answer your question?
Actually, the question was for the people that did this study. The question was, can you go back, if someone is in the middle of a project, can we legally go back and put new charges on them, have an impact fee that goes into place on something you're already in the middle of? That's my question. Or is it strictly, once we enact it, does it, in most places, is this how this works? In most places, is it only when someone comes in at the very onset of development and starts the development process? Because I believe they said earlier that it was at the very beginning of the zoning. I'm not sure. Devin,
I'll
are you?
answer this question. So the drafting of the ordinance is not part of the consultant's scope of work. So that is being separately researched. I think the phrase is commonly coined grandfathered in. That's being researched to understand if the council were to decide to adopt this fee, where in the process could it, defensively be imposed, knowing that people do invest money in land acquisition, they invest in a lot of things, they have models that they operate under for each project. So that is part of the research that outside counsel is doing to draft the ordinance that the council's interested in considering. So that is under research, not through the consultant.
Just have another comment. As an attorney, I know I asked a question about whether any state law changes would be needed on this, and I know there are impact fees in other communities in this state, but my observation is that there's never been a challenge to them, and the reason there hasn't been a challenge is because in other communities, the development community has generally bought in and agreed to the need for impact fees. And I'm saying, I guess my point is, if you're going to have a plan and don't want challenges to it, you need to have a plan where the builders and the developers agree with you, number one, that there's a need for it, and just as important, that the level of fees is sustainable and reasonable. There's going to be concern that you raise them this high, that they're talking that these $6,000-7,000 fees, that's going to directly impact the competitive nature of a house in one county versus a house in another county. There's going to be a lot of concern over that. And if you raise them too high, you're going to be encouraging legal challenges to it. Like I said, the only places where they have them, they started out with some general consensus where the builder community and developer community felt like, okay, we see the need, we see that this number is needed, and we feel like this won't kill or drastically hurt our industry. And the numbers you're talking about, to me, strike me as a little high, what you're doing, and that's just a comment for whatever it's worth.
Are there any other questions? And the idea is, again, we have to hear from what you all think. And I think you make a good point is that you're stakeholders. And we don't want to make a decision that's going to be in such that everybody suffers from it. Like you say, it's got to be for the good of all. And you want to try to make this work. There are going to be many opportunities for more feedback, more questioning, and so on. So, again, this is not a done deal. This is not where we say, this is exactly what we're going to do. There are going to be more opportunities. And I'm glad that you all are here to say that, because what we don't know, what you're thinking, it doesn't really help us when we have to make that decision. I need to know, or we need to know, council people know, hey, what would be something that will be workable? That's the idea. That's why we want people here. You get the chance to say how this would work or won't work, but we got to have input from everybody. And that's the reason why we went this route. It would be very easy for you to put something on the table, like you said, try to shove it down people's throat, and they come at you from all angles. Don't want to operate that way. We want to make sure that we're transparent, that people get an opportunity to say, I don't like that idea, here's a better idea, or here's what I'm thinking. And get your questions answered in a timely fashion. So again, thank you for being here. Like I said, it's all about, as CJ May said, we're all in this together. And so therefore, it's got to be something that's going to be workable for everybody if this is going to work. And buy-in. You got something?
What does future feedback look like? I saw on the schedule earlier that we had this meeting today, and then everything else was TBD on the rest of the schedule.
Well, our next thing will be to be set up with some feedback from the public and so on. Yeah, and then have some more, maybe some more stakeholder meetings. We probably need to do that. That's something I and Devin and the staff will work on. That's that. Like I said, this was the first leg of it. We got the information, and it was brought to council, and our next step will say, okay, let's now talk to stakeholders, see what they're thinking. You all as developers, what do you all think? And then have more conversation with that. And then, of course, invite the public more to what they think. Okay? CJ? Yeah.
Mayor, I wish we had got to see this before this meeting, because I can't see that, and I couldn't hear half what she was saying. So what we'll do is, if you're going to send this out, we're going to go back and headache this a little bit and determine how it really impacts us. We think from quick math, it's pretty substantial, but we could be wrong. So.
And feel free if, once you go back and look at this, and once we get this to, email me. Hey, Mayor, from the presentation we saw, here's my questions. Here's some things I need clarity on. And then next time we do this, we have some type of footprint to say, okay, here we are. Here's the question that was asked. Here's what we think we try to answer those. Okay? All right? Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah.
I know that this is something the council's been talking about for some time. I'm not sure how many members of the council are here right now, but I see a couple at least. And I think the biggest advocates need to be in front of this group. And with some of the experience that I've had, like I said, over the past 29 years, when you're on the council and you're advocating for something that may not go over extremely well, they need to hear from the group that's impacted the most. And I'll share one more item. In this community, for a long time, there have been a lot of developers that have kind of come and gone. Many have gone. I've seen it. Mike Scoggin, you've seen it for 30 years. It's a challenge to do business in this community. It's time consuming, it's expensive, and the folks that are here today, as I said, that they care, And from a community standpoint, we need them to be successful. The more successful they are, the better it is for the general fund, for the city, the county, and the school system. I think we all know that. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, David. Again, thank you for showing up today. Again, this is the start of it, and like I said, we'll have more opportunities, and we'll try to get that information out on our webpage. Like I said, again, feel free. If you don't have my email address, it's the easiest thing to find: bernie.jenkins@georgetownky.gov. So email me, like everybody else in the community do. They do all the time about HOA to everything else. So you just join the troops and let me know what your thought is, and we'll get it out there and see what we can do with that. Thank you again.